So number one really important communication tip to all of us in a cross-cultural relationship is to avoid making assumptions based on what you hear, based on their communication style, based on their cultural communication. Like, imagine if it's a loud communication, it doesn't have to mean that you are not being loved. Or look at Eastern European cultures or Southern European cultures, when sometimes words are being used that might sound very harsh, like "I hate you." Imagine a Northern European who takes that seriously. "Oh, you hate me." While for the Eastern European culture, that's just showing the passion. "I actually love you, but I say I hate you." So important is to be patient and not make these assumptions.
Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationship. And in today's podcast episode, I'm going to welcome Enikö. Enikö has 2 homes at the moment. One is in the Netherlands, the other one is in Portugal, but she was originally born into a diplomat's family in Hungary. And the topic we're going to talk about today is communication in an intercultural relationship. That's the top 1 topic on social media. So whenever I share a little bit about our intercultural relationship, communication is the topic you guys frequently ask me questions about. And I myself do have many questions on this topic as well, because as in any other relationship, this topic is important, but especially in an intercultural relationship where you do have 2 languages, where you have cultural differences that play a huge role in a relationship as well. Communication is super important. And I know for sure that everyone who's listening and or watching right now will be super excited for this episode. So let's give a warm welcome to Enikö. Thank you so much for being here today. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Tell us all about you.
It's really nice to be invited to this podcast. I really appreciate it. I've been following your account and watching all these love stories unfolding, all these couples you talk to and you show them in your account. So it's really fascinating for me every time to work for intercultural couples, because it's like a huge puzzle that we try to solve together. And there is so much excitement, so much challenge in it that makes it interesting. And at the same time, it's really difficult sometimes. I am Enikö Helyes. I'm originally from Hungary, but I lived most of my life in Netherlands, for example. I traveled with my family. I traveled in my adult life, and I'm still traveling. So as you said, I am spending my time between the Netherlands and Portugal, which is, if we talk about cultural differences, then 2 very different cultures. At the same time, I have intercultural relationships. I have children who are cross-cultural, who are having relationships. And I'm working already for 20 years in cross-cultural couples who are struggling with actually daily couple struggles. But those struggles are just extra difficult because of their different values or different communication styles. So that's the extra challenge, to focus on that they can learn to understand each other. So I work with integrative psychotherapy, and my practices in the Netherlands, in Portugal, and online.
I would like to directly do the deep dive already, if it's okay for you. You've mentioned a word, or actually 2 words, communication styles. What do you mean by that?
Communication styles. It's good to dive into that indeed immediately, because it's so culturally defined. Take a culture like, let's say, the Northern culture, so the Dutch culture, or maybe even German, you can tell it yourself. It's a very direct communication style in which people go into the conflict. So they are ready to confront, speak about it, and solve the situation. While if you talk about Eastern European or even Southern European cultures, and then I'm not sure how it is in South America, so maybe you can help me with that. They are very avoiding, so they would not want to go into the conflict. An indirect communication. So those are, for example, 2 different communication styles
You have the direct and indirect communication. It's just interesting because it's a topic I create content on, different communication styles, indirect, direct communication. And then also, depending on where you're from exactly, obviously plays a huge role as well. Also the way you are raised, like there's just so many factors that play a role. So it's not only your culture, but it also is your environment, your whole environment just plays a role into it. Your experiences as well, obviously. Actually, that's one of my favorite topics, to be honest, because I find it very fascinating to see how someone is communicating depending on their upbringing. In our case, like I can only talk for the people here in Argentina, especially in Buenos Aires. They have their style is like more direct. So, but there are specific topics which they just like to, they're not getting to the point. So they don't like to address it. So it really depends on the topic as well. And they have a lot of influence from Italy and Spain, which I find very interesting as well. So there's this like different influences here as well. And yeah, also in our case, when we started dating, we all had to figure it out. Like we were just in love. We were like excited. We wanted to get to know each other, and all the additional things that come with your upbringing and with the culture were just an extra layer. We were just like at some point, oh my God, what are we actually doing? Like I'm talking about mangoes, he's talking about apples. How is that even possible? Like why don't we find a common ground? So I'm wondering, what's the experience you've made with your clients in the field of communication? What are the biggest challenges?
Oh, yes. That's definitely a good topic, because when you speak different languages already, you use the language different and you have different values. So when you add all that together, you can have a lot of misunderstandings or feel really hurt by each other's communication. So that's why for cross-cultural couples, it's so important to be patient and to sign for this, to accept it, that this is going to happen, that you might feel hurt by the other, but that you should be able to open up and express, be honest about it, that you feel hurt, or maybe you feel laughed at, or that the communication of your partner is really harsh, that you don't understand. Take this couple that I worked with, who one of them was Italian and the other was German. And the Italian was used to expressing emotions with a very loud voice, like with passion, and, really be in her emotions and express it, because that was important for her. If we love each other, we express our emotions, we are honest, and we are in the conflict. And for her German partner, this was really shocking and even intimidating, because every time he heard harsh, loud words, he felt, oh, that's a fight. I don't want a fight. I rather have conflict solving, like let's just solve it quickly. While for the Italian lady, it was, yeah, let's just speak it out and show each other our emotions. So you see two different words who clash here.
I have a good example with that as well, because in my case, as a German, even though I appreciate the direct communication, I have an issue with, not an issue is the wrong word, but what's a trigger for me is, for example, Nacho and I, we have a conflict or a discussion, like we don't have like a typical, not a very loud fight culture. So we're more like communicating and talking it out. But what I've realized, and I think that has to do with the way I grew up and the family where I'm from, is that if we're in a conflict, my first thought is like, oh my God, this is horrible. I want to get out of this situation. How do we solve this? I want to discuss it right now. And I want in the end of the conversation that we agree, which is not always the case. So sometimes, as you say, we agree to disagree, But my upbringing, the way I grew up, my cultural surrounding was always like, okay, you have to sort it out, you have to figure it out, you have to work on yourself, and you find an agreement, which I had to learn that this is not always possible, especially if you come from, sometimes it feels like two different worlds, and then you just have to accept the fact that it's not possible to find an agreement right now, but also to be fine with this and to acknowledge that this is not the end of the relationship right now. And it took me a long time until I was able to really get to the point to understand that this is the way to roll and that this is what works in our relationship. Again, the topic of different cultures to me is just so fascinating, and especially the example you've just named, where I feel like if on top of that, if you would be loud and if you would start, like in my opinion, screaming, even though if he thinks he's not, I be like, okay, he's breaking up with me, for example. So that would just trigger so much in me that I'd be like, wait, what's happening here? Why else? For him, or in your example, that would be just a normal conversation. So I'm wondering, what is it you can do as a couple if you feel like, okay, you're at the point where you have different communication styles, and obviously it's just also kind of difficult to move away from your communication style. What is it to maybe gain a better understanding where the other person is coming from, or what questions should you ask yourself, but also within the communication as a couple?
Safety indeed is very important in any relationship, but we can quicker feel unsafe in a cross-cultural relationship because of what you mentioned, a different conflict style, different communication style. So number one really important communication tip to all of us in a cross-cultural relationship is to avoid making assumptions based on what you hear, based on their communication style, based on their cultural communication. Like imagine if it's a loud communication, it doesn't have to mean that you are not being loved. Or look at Eastern European cultures or Southern European cultures when sometimes words are being used that might sound very harsh, like I hate you. And imagine a Northern European who takes that seriously. Oh, you hate me. While for the Eastern European culture, that's just showing the passion. I actually love you, but I say I hate you. And the Northern European will make the assumption that, okay, she's expressing she hates me. Maybe she wants a divorce, or maybe she wants to break up. So important is to be patient and not make these assumptions. And number two communication tip is, in these cases, to ask clarifying questions to avoid these misunderstandings. Like, clarify the meanings. What do you mean with I hate you? Do you really hate me as a person? Do you hate me every day? What do you mean with hating me?
Because to me, hate is a very strong word as well. That would trigger a lot as well. Definitely. That's almost, to me, it's almost an insult, to be honest.
I feel that, yeah.
But I'm wondering if you're in such a conversation, because usually a disagreement or a discussion can heat up very easily if you address a topic that might trigger the other person, for example, a sensitive topic, for example, or if you just sometimes you're just also in a bad mood, you're not waking up every day and you're just like, oh, today everything is sunshine and I am the best version of myself. Sometimes you're just in a bad mood and your partner has to handle that. It is what it is. I know that we've all been there. And then, those are days where your communication might just not be on top and you feel like, I want to address this. I just don't know how. And then you start addressing it and you realize, okay, we are basically getting to a point of no return anymore. So if you reach the point where communication is just heating up, what is your advice? What should you do in that moment as a couple? Because sometimes it's just difficult to center and to remind yourself, okay, this is not leading anywhere. Let's just step back. Is there, out of your experience, out of all the conversations you had with couples, can you recommend anything you could do to make sure that you're not stepping to a point where you might regret, for example, anything you're saying?
Yeah, I understand, what you say. You talk about de-escalation, right? Also, first, I would like to also mention that actually what is really cool about cross-cultural relationships is that because they trigger each other more, they also learn a more effective way of communication and they work more on their relationships. Also because of they put so much effort into learning to communicate, even if it's just the language, and on top of that, the communication style or the cultural differences, they put so much effort into the relationship that the appreciation for each other is even bigger. So it creates a stronger bond. So to not just see the communication problems as problems, but actually also opportunities for cross-cultural couples who have the opportunity to create a deeper understanding for each other and a deeper bond. But let's go back to the de-escalation, what you asked, because I guess that counts for every couple. And when you notice indeed that the situation is heated up and you are just so strongly in your emotion, it's really important that you notice, hey, what's happening between us? How is it possible that we are feeling so much resistance or tension. And the best thing to do is just speak that out. If one of the two can speak it out, hey, there's so much tension in between us. Shall we calm down together? What happened to us that we reached this point when actually we were just coming back from home and we were so much looking forward to just give each other a hug? Shall we cool down? Basically speaking out of the process, what happens between two people, like, oh, how did we get here? Oh, we are losing it. And then take, indeed, as you said, a step back and maybe just sit down and sit next to each other, quiet, just hold the space together. That's a nice way of calming down and getting to a point where you can clarify the meanings and talk about the assumptions or the expectations, why things went wrong. Also, actually, my favorite tool for every cross-cultural couples is humor. Like, be able to laugh about it. And of course, that's a bit hard when you are so heated. But if you can realize, like, oh, what are we doing? Like, are we this passionate couple being so angry at each other? Maybe we can just make a joke. And a joke can be an icebreaker that can also de-escalate the situation. But the best way to do it is indeed just speak out, hey, this is not nice for both of us. What do we need so that we can calm down and continue this conversation together?
Yeah, it's not easy. Speaking out of experience.
Yeah. And now maybe it's also nice to talk about another typical difference is how we indeed express emotions, because you have cultures where it's kind of, you just don't do it. You just don't talk about your emotions. Imagine a culture like Eastern European culture where you just don't talk about your emotions. It's not done. You keep it for yourself. You're supposed to solve it on your own. You need to be independent. And it's, I wouldn't say shameful, but it's embarrassing to express to your partner what you feel. And combine that with, again, a Northern culture where it's really important for them, even for Germans, to speak it out, to talk about it. And then there can, a situation can grow in which there is a huge irritation from both sides, because maybe the one who does not express the emotions wants so much that the other will read her mind, like, read my mind. You should know what I feel. And that's her expectation based on how a relationship would be maybe with someone from the same culture. And the other person is like, but I cannot read minds. I learned that if there is something, we have to talk about it. So you need to talk about it. So there is so much irritation that can exist because there is this cultural clash of actually being able to express our emotions or not. Do you recognize some of that?
Yeah. All of it. And like, here, that's me too. For us in that case. No, I just, I'm at a point where I can make fun of it because after so many years, we've reached a point where we know, like, it's gonna be a point where we just discuss about stupid things sometimes. Like the other day, it was a bag of candy that was open and I got mad about it because it was spread all over, and like stupid things that are not even worth to be arguing about. But I was in a bad mood and I was just like, but I apologized afterwards. I was just like, hey, sorry, that was just so stupid. And that's just like in any other relationship as well. So it doesn't have necessarily to do something with our cultural background or upbringing. It was just a stupid moment. I was just in a bad mood and I just let it out on my partner, which wasn't cool after all, But then we also have arguments where in my head, I'm like, where is that even coming from? I'm really trying to understand the other side. Because I personally, I'm really good in putting myself in the minds of others, trying to see it from a different perspective. But then if I'm getting angry, I'm not capable of doing that anymore. So at some point, the emotions are just taking over and I feel like my mind, I just let go. And also what happens quite often is that I'm just like, why can't I just express myself in German? In German, I would know exactly what to say. I would exactly know how to express myself. But no, we're communicating. I feel so dumb right now because I'm out of words, but I want to make my standing point here right now. I want to make sure that I'm understanding what he's saying, but also that I'm understandable, so he knows what I'm saying. So how do we get together? And what I love about Nacho, for example, if that happens, is that he's usually the one who's like, okay, let's just calm down. Let's just think about like what just happened. And then in most cases, immediately we realize that's just a situation that or that came out of nowhere. And it's not even that dramatic, but we just like both of us in the moment, heated argument. Again, we don't have the typical fight culture of an Italian, for example, or Italians where we just scream at each other and people might think we're breaking up. So that's not us. It's like very like, it's not tensed, but we are like, it's just like one after the other, And so when you've just explained the language, for example, that plays a role as well, and then all the other factors that are important, also the culture in general. I have couples I've interviewed where religion obviously is playing a huge role as well, and you just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then the explosion is just perfect. So I'm also wondering, because all the advice you've given is very valuable, but for example, what I would have wished when we started dating, I kind of wanted someone to tell me beforehand that this is what you have to discuss, like sit down, here's a list, a checklist, go through it and make sure to understand your different communication styles, for example, understand your cultural background. So I'm really wondering, is there anything you could offer? Is there anything out of your experience, a little handout, a source, anything like that for couples that are dating interculturally, that just started dating, to make sure that they tackle those topics beforehand already?
It's a good question, Tina, because it's about getting to know each other. And with respect to that, it's the same as for any couple. Now, those especially there are a lot of card games that you can purchase. Maybe I can send some titles later so that you can mention that somewhere in the podcast. Basically, you just want to indeed get to know each other. So maybe you can even dedicate an evening per week where you just ask questions to each other. Like, hey, how did you grow up? How was it with your parents? What did they do when they were angry with each other? What was the bond in your family? How did you feel safe? Or how did you feel loved? How did your parents express love to each other? Have you ever seen them actually cuddling? I have many clients from Northern Europe who've never seen their parents cuddling, because it's not so much in the culture to express love, to use the love language of touching, intimacy. While Southern cultures, they really like to show their love through touching and hugging, and so absolutely, it's a great idea for couples in general to ask these questions to get to know each other. Now, I do see that the new generations are more and more conscious, so they have more potential to actually do it and discover each other this way. I would say the times when I was young and I was dating, I did not think about it for sure. So basically what was important for me is patience, and a ton of patience, and learning to show empathy. So another really important communication tip is show empathy. Whatever your partner is doing, if you see your partner raising the voice and maybe even you feel in yourself that you feel a bit threatened or intimidated, just show empathy. And we don't have to really, really feel with the other, but we can express like, hey, I see you are really angry now. And that way, expressing, creating a bond actually between each other by appreciating, by acknowledging what the other feels. Showing empathy is number one, maybe even most important communication tip for cross-cultural relationships. And again, it doesn't mean that we have to exactly agree with what the other does or that we have to suppress what we feel. We don't have to do that. It's just sometimes even just repeating the words the other is saying, or just saying, hey, that must be hard for you, or you must be really, really pissed now. It's just hearing that. I don't know how is that for you, Tina, but if my partner just says that, like, oh, I see you are really angry now. If I hear that, I'm already less angry.
It's acknowledging my feelings, definitely, which is of all what you've just explained about the topic of communication, because a few weeks ago because I have a community on school as well, where I share a lot of valuable advice, guidelines, and everything I'm working on in the background. So those are information I'm not sharing on social media, for example. It's also quite personal here and there. And I have a guideline on communication, actually, communication in an intercultural relationship, where everything you've just mentioned is included, and also like how to grow empathy, for example, because it's something you can learn as well. And it's just the little things that make a difference. What you've just explained, summarize like, hey, I see that you're very angry. Do I understand correctly that this is triggering you, for example? Can we talk about that? Is it okay for you if we actually talk about it? And if we do an in-depth on this, like making sure, first of all, that even though if you're in an argument, that you're still with your partner, so you're not enemies, you're still in a team, but also making sure that you understand where the other person is coming from, even though if you have, and that's possible, even though if you have a different opinion on a specific topic. And I think this is definitely something you can learn. I also think that it is a lot of work, but if you are at the point where you can take yourself back and reflect and make sure that you heard the other person, that you understood what the other person was saying, and that you summarize it in your own words so the other person can reflect on it as well and confirm what you've just said with what they're feeling, that's a great tool, which again, to some couples it comes naturally, but some might have to work on that a little bit. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and Tina, it's great that you tell that. What is also good to add to that is taking responsibility also. Like I can so much remember that when I arrived to Netherlands and in the culture where I come from, when you pick up the phone, everybody sounds a bit moody, like this is me. Now in the Netherlands, if you pick up the phone, they expect from you that you are happy. Hello, this is Enikö. What can I help you? And I couldn't bring it up because I was not used to that. But then I would get always these remarks like, why are you always depressed? Why are you always moody? So at one point, these remarks can really be hurtful because that's just normal for me and that's just where I come from, and I'm not going to force myself to communicate in a different way. Of course, at one point we might adapt a bit, but we want to also be authentic. And it might be hurtful to always be criticized for who I am. Like, hey, you are too shy. Hey, your jokes are too direct. Or you're always sad. I don't know if you recognize those remarks. So in those cases, it's also our responsibility to speak it out and just say honestly that we feel hurt and ask our partner to consider it and also share it what we expect. Like, can you please next time just understand that I'm used to in a different way of picking up the phone, and that's me, but I will try my best.
Can we also do an in-depth on the difference between a wish and a command or expectation, because there's so much in between. So how do I phrase a wish? What is a wish exactly?
Yeah, but the command speaks for itself. That we would say, you don't talk to me ever like that, no? Then that's this from this very strict commanding position. But if you say, I feel just hurt by being criticized for how I pick up the phone. Can you please consider me? So if we use the I position first, explaining what we feel, and then the ask, can you think about it? Will you do it that way? Then it already sounds like a wish, no? And if we even can add at the end, like, I trust we can do this together, then we even create a bond.
Perfect combination.
Yeah. I had to think of something else that I find important for cross-cultural couples, if you're okay that I mention. It is also the nonverbal communication. Because, for example, again, Portuguese, Hungarian cultures used to have this bit more sarcastic humor or tone to talk to each other. They're a little bit teasing each other, and maybe another culture is not used to that. And this can be hurtful. So that's where a gesture or a body language can come in which, for example, when you say something sarcastic, you blink with your eye, or you do make a smile with it, so that the other will realize, hey, this is not threatening, this is still safe. But she's just there with her thing, with the sarcasm, and she doesn't mean to hurt me. I'm not sure if you have such examples in the Argentinian German combination.
No, because I think over the past few years, we've kind of met in the middle. For example, I'm expressing myself much more with my hands. A friend actually of mine, a German friend, noticed that last week. She said like, hey, you became Argentinized. Anyway, so you become more Argentinian the way you use your hands, and you're just like, always on top of a table communicating with your hands. Because I've realized, I think that's the reason I've realized now that I'm learning Spanish, if I talk to Spanish speaking people, it helps me to understand them better if they use nonverbal communication. So for some reason, I included it in the way I'm communicating as well. But it's still like something in between the German way of nonverbal communication, which is basically very stiff, and the Argentinian way, which just like usually all over the place like this, but I'm anywhere in between. So I'm not 100% Argentinian with that, but I'm more like, it's like just specific area where I'm communicating with my hands, for example, which I find very interesting. But besides this, no, not really. Like, so for us, that did not cause any conflicts where I thought, for example, okay, his words is not matching his body language, in my opinion. We didn't have that. But I understand that in some cultures, it can be quite confusing sometimes.
I heard you saying, Tina, that you are already Argentinized. How did you say that?
How did I say Argentinized? I think it's Argentinized.
Argentinized, yeah. And I like to talk about it too, because that's also so interesting. Yeah? Because you spent some time already in another culture, and you probably feel you are a bit adapting to that communication style, and maybe your values change a bit, or your view on certain conflicts change a bit. So you have your roots, but you are already integrating the new culture into your system. And also as a couple, you are creating probably your own communication style and conflict solving style.
It might be actually, but it's still difficult to point out where's what coming from. It just became one after 10 years of dating.
Yeah, well, I find it very interesting because I'm originally from Eastern Europe, but I spent most of the time outside of it. And I spent most of my years actually in the Netherlands, so in the north. So if you ask me, do I communicate as a Hungarian or do I communicate as a Dutch? I can't even tell it anymore, because I guess it's a combination. And take me then to Portugal, to again, a totally different communication culture. I had to notice that even though I feel connected with the value system, for example, the Hungarian and the Portuguese value system connects very easily, but my communication style has become already very Nordic. So my expectation from Portuguese people is to act like a northern person and to be able to tell what your problem is, and to be assertive and get into the conflict. While actually, based on my original roots, I would be more diplomatic and humble and more waiting and careful. So it's also funny for me to notice how much we change while we are living abroad, and how actually, if you want to explain, so what is your communication style? It's not enough to say it's just the country you come from, but so many more levels. It's where you grew up, where you spent, where did you study, where you spend most of your time, what kind of people surrounded you. So there are so many layers of communicational values or cultural values that then add up at the end to how you communicate, or which values you find important in communication.
And it can change over time as well, which is also very interesting, only because what I know doesn't mean that this is going to stay like this forever. But for me, it changed a lot, especially here in Argentina, because, for example, but that's another topic. So that's more on the field of identity crisis, to be honest, or code switching maybe even. But what happens to me, for example, here, because I feel like I'm free, everyone is quite easygoing, so I'm easygoing as well. I'm just like with my hands, and I'm very open-minded. But throw me back to actually in a couple of weeks, I'm going to fly to Germany, and I know that my behavior in Germany will just be different. My way of communication will be different, especially because I know I have to speak German again, and it's easier for me to express myself in certain situations, not necessarily in a fight, but most of the time it's easier for me to express myself in English because, I mean, my husband and I were communicating in English since we know each other. And then once I'm back in my German role in Germany, I know, okay, this is my language, my mother tongue again, but I don't feel comfortable speaking my own mother tongue anymore because it's just a person I don't recognize anymore speaking a language that I don't feel comfortable in anymore. It's just very interesting, and this is also shaping the way on how I communicate. So I'm wondering, is that normal?
Yeah, I feel you, Tina, there. Same for me when going back to your roots and the people you know from your original culture, that if you use the communication style you develop, that there will be again a conflict because they are expecting you to be the same person you were before you left. But you're not, because you have gained and changed indeed. And the language is also interesting. I do sometimes work with, for example, last I worked with this Portuguese girl who spent her youth in Belgium, so abroad, and she really liked to talk in English. And I have many examples of that, of people who rather speak actually another language to communicate because that's somehow safer for them. That's how they feel safe. That's when they feel the skills to express themselves. So not in their original language, but in another language. And now I have a question to you. Do you notice that in different languages you feel a bit different, like you have a different confidence level, or maybe you are funnier in one language and less funny in the other, or more serious, like that it almost creates different personalities for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean by identity crisis.
Yeah, identity crisis.
I have different personalities. Definitely. I like my English-speaking personality as for now the most. Not sure how I would like the Spanish-speaking personality once I get to good level of Spanish, because right now my Spanish is not good enough. But it's interesting because apparently my friends here in Buenos Aires think that I'm funny, and I think I'm not funny at all. I am that's my German personality that tells me, no, you're not funny. Because it's still like, even though I'm fluent in English, okay, I make mistakes, I have an accent, whatever, I'm over that, that's fine for me. But I don't feel like I can make jokes, but apparently I'm accidentally funny, maybe the way I express myself, because I'm not really thinking about it. While else, when speaking German, I'm a little bit more shy. So the German personality is shy, the English personality is more outgoing and doesn't care too much about what people think, for example. The German personality does. And it's just like, can't we combine those two somehow? No, but it's not possible.
Oh, wow. This is so good that you say this. I totally understand that we can just become somebody else in another language because it's a new environment and no one knows us. So we can just be really us, and that it can inspire to be actually maybe even more authentic. So you might be also funny in German, but perhaps some limiting beliefs keep you from being that authentic, funny you in that language. And that raises the question in me. Do you notice that sometimes when you get to know someone in a cross-cultural relationship, for example, you meet your husband in English, and at one point you learn his language, or he learns yours, and you switch the language to another language, how much impact that has on the dynamic of a relationship, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, my husband speaks German, so his German level is actually quite good. And I'm not sure why it is, but as soon as he speaks German, I connect on a different level with him, because my head is just like, first of all, I acknowledge the effort of him speaking my mother tongue or learning my mother tongue, which I find very difficult. Like, I know I'm in a situation where I have to speak his mother tongue, and I'm just like, how the hell did he learn German in just like 2.5 years? And I'm here since more than 1 year, and I feel like I'm talking like a 3-year-old, barely speaking Spanish. But so once he speaks German, for example, my brain is just like, I like spreading all those endorphins, being super happy, because I really think it's a huge effort from him to learn my mother tongue. So my brain is like immediately sending signals like he is adorable for learning my language and he's able to speak it now. So that's one thing. So I'm not sure if I'm quite objective on this. But once he speaks German, so when we communicate German, my whole body is just like, oh, he's cute. He's the most amazing. He can say whatever he wants right now. He can insult me in German. I don't care because he speaks my language. That's more like how I feel about it, to be honest. But I know where your question is leading.
It's nice to hear that it has such a positive impact also. Really, really nice to hear that you can appreciate it so much. I do see that with couples where they learn to speak the other person's language, that they appreciate it so much. Indeed, I meant also the other side where suddenly you see a different character, like, huh? Is that my partner? I don't recognize this person speaking this language. And that's somehow speaking a common language, which is none of the two, none of their original language, creates some kind of safety in which you're just a bit more protected, because you don't have to feel less of the other because your language is not as elaborated, or because maybe you don't know the expressions, you might not feel as confident. And in a common language, you kind of feel a bit more equal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've had couples in the podcast already that confirmed 100% what you've just shared, especially on top of this, the feeling of, for example, if you communicate in the language of your partner, let's give Italian and German, and one part is speaking Italian, so you start dating in Italian and you stick to Italian for the whole of your relationship. So that's the language you communicate in. But for one part, it's still not their mother tongue. So the other part still has an advantage, which can feel like it's unfair for the other part, like, or create this wish of, if only he or she would feel how it feels for me, because they will not go through that unless they switch to English, for example. And in our case, we don't have that because we communicate in English. But I understand if you're dating and you speak the language the other one is fluent in because it's their mother tongue, can kind of create the feeling of, okay, that's unfair. And again, I wish he or she would understand how I feel at that very moment, because whenever we have a discussion or a disagreement, I feel like we're not on the same level. We're not on eye level, because this person has an advantage expressing themselves in their mother tongue. So how is that in reality? Like, how does it feel like for the couples you're coaching?
Well, in this case, I even recognize it from my own situation, Tina, that I met my partner in English, and then we dated and spent some years together in English. And the moment we got children and we started raising them in Dutch, so we switched to Dutch. Speaking then Dutch really put me in a position where I did not feel as confident anymore. I don't know, I somehow associated with not being good enough, like my language is not good enough. I cannot fully express my emotions or my wishes. I feel a bit less than my partner. And that's really not a nice feeling that can create, indeed, tensions in conflict situations, or create extra emotions. So yeah, what is there to do? Interestingly enough, in our situation, it's my partner who started speaking English again to me. So it wasn't even my choice. I guess it was important for him too, that he is sure that I can express myself the way I want to express myself. What is it there to see with couples? Because even speaking English, it's easy to say we have a common language, but even speaking English is different for every culture. So the level of communication, level of common language is also not always the same level. Like the common language is sometimes also different for both. Again, I would say patience and clarify the meanings. Listen carefully. And if you don't understand something, just ask back and clarify what the other one meant, which words the other used, and how come the other person used those words.
It would also be a very interesting topic. So I'm thinking in my head, if someone is listening or watching right now, if there's anyone here that made a similar experience that just know exactly how it feels like if you don't feel on eye level, because you're speaking your partner's language and the daily communication, please get in contact with me. I'd love to record a podcast episode with you because I'm sure we could do an in-depth on this topic as well, but also on the topic of patience, because I feel like I'm not the most patient person. I constantly have to remind myself, take it step by step, don't see the big pictures, like take the big picture and then basically split it up to smaller steps and you'll be fine. Da, da, da. But if I'd be in a situation where, let's stick to that case, where I constantly have to ask my partner, like, hey, did I understand correctly? Is this what you meant? I don't know how I would feel about that, to be honest, because I think I'm not sure if I personally might question my capability of communication if I don't fully understand what my partner is saying. And if I have to summarize and repeat, is this what you mean? Do I understand correctly? And at some point, I might even feel like, okay, I'm just stumped because I don't get what he's trying to say. So it has to do a lot with mindset, with your own beliefs as well, with what you think you're capable of. But putting this aside, your proudness of wanting to get it immediately is so difficult. Like, at least for me, it's super difficult.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned the word pride. I had the same word popping up in my brain. Pride makes it sometimes also really hard for cross-cultural couples, right? When you are just really proud of your culture or proud of your language or proud that you finally learned a language and you can speak it even if you're not fluent in it, and then still being misunderstood or criticized. That's just really difficult. So let's not forget it. When we fall in love with someone from another culture, we kind of forget all this, huh? That it's gonna bring quite some complications, and that we need to know that it will take us so much tolerance and patience to really accept the other, not just with their personal habits, but their cultural habits and values that they bring with them. And that we should be also able to accept criticism and that we don't take it personal. If we get a critic about our communication style or our jokes or our general attitude, that we don't take it personal. It just shows that the other person does not understand us and is trying to make connection, but is maybe feeling a bit unhandy how to do that, or they don't know what to do with us. For example, Eastern European cultures, but also Asian cultures, they are quite humble and quiet. And if you arrive to Nordic countries, then they will just be worrying about you, like, oh, why are you so shy? And why are you not more speaking up? And it's not good for you. You can really feel judged. You can really feel judged with the values you take with you. Especially, I worked with Indonesian and other Asian cultures who feel not appreciated because in their culture, that's so important to be humble. That's number one value, to be humble and to not be loud and to give space to each other. While in Nordic cultures, it's just really important that you speak up and you tell your opinion, that you're master of your own destiny. So indeed, we must realize that when we fall in love with someone from such a far different culture, that we will get criticism and there will be no understanding sometimes, and we will be misjudged or underestimated even. And it's okay to feel that pain. It's okay to express that pain. And it's also important to let that pain go and realize this is what we signed for.
Yeah, I wish there'd be one guideline to be prepared for all the challenges in an intercultural relationship, especially when it comes to communication. And we've learned today, I think you made it pretty clear that communication is not only what you say, it's also how you express yourself, which language you express yourself, your cultural background, the environment, and all. Like, there are just like so many, and you've explained it with layers that are playing a role into communication. How are you feeling? If you've just moved abroad, if you're struggling with something, communication might be different or difficult as well. So again, I wish there would just be one guideline, one checklist, but it doesn't exist. What I think, and this is just the perfect ending to this topic before we move on how to get in contact with you. What I think is just lovely, what you've just shared is like, hey, you've decided to get into this wonderful, beautiful mess to learn about yourself, to grow together, and to tackle everything that's going to come along. And also, and I've mentioned that in a few podcast recordings as well, it's just like the best thing you can do is also to reflect. Take the time, sit down and reflect on how far you've come as an individual, but also on how far you've come as a couple, what you've managed. If it's paperwork, if it's meeting the families, disagreements, all the little things, and just be proud of yourself, because eventually, even though if you don't see the big picture yet, or if you're not the most patient person like I am, it's in those moments when you do reflect, this is also when you realize, wow, I've come that far, and now I'm excited for what's going to come next out of my experience.
Let me just react to the last word you said, excited, because excitement, isn't it why this is even interesting? Cross-cultural relationships, to be honest, I might never even choose for someone who is coming from my culture anymore, because it's also so much fun. It's never a dull moment. We are never bored. There is always a piece of puzzle we need to solve or figure out. So also remember that when we have these struggles, this also keeps us alive, and it makes the relationship more interesting and more challenging. And so it's also fun to discover each other's values, and it broadens our view on the world. And we learn so many new values, and we learn so much about each other and ourselves. So it's an endless opportunity also.
It is perfect ending to this episode. Obviously, we could do much more in-depth on the topic of communication in an intercultural relationship. So I'm wondering, for everyone who would like to learn more, or for everyone who's struggling right now in different fields, like who moved abroad, for example, or who resonates with what we've just talked about and feels like, okay, I feel like the way we're communicating could be a little bit better, how to improve this. What's the best way? Like, first of all, what do you actually offer exactly? And what's the best way to reach out?
Well, anyone is welcome who is having a cross-cultural relationship or fallen in love with someone from another culture. But also if you are even locals, any couple, any expat or non-expat is always invited to sign up for an initial talk with me. That's possible through my website, also through my Instagram page. And I provide couple therapy sessions and also individual sessions. Sometimes a couple therapy session means also working here and there, also individual and then joint sessions. And so you can always reach out to me for an initial talk and see how I can help you. Now, I work in the practice in 2 countries, as we mentioned, 2 locations, but I also work online. And sometimes there are even crazy setups in which the couple is even separated, one in one country, the other in another country, and me maybe even in a 3rd country. And all of that is possible because in these 20 years of experience, I developed all the techniques to make that happen and help and guide these couples to find their communication, even if they are separated by an ocean.
Long distance relationships, yes.
Long distance relationships.
Also interesting.
We didn't talk about that exactly for another podcast.
For another, how to communicate on 8,000 kilometers online. And yeah, that's also another topic. Have been there. So yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for doing it in depth with me today on the topic of communication. Obviously, I'm going to link everything in the side notes as well as in the description. So for everyone who wants to reach out to Enikö, they can do so by just clicking the links below. And yeah, with this being said, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy your evening, and thank you so much for taking your time today.
Yeah, thank you too, Tina. It was as inspiring to me as well. And I look forward to listening to the other podcasts. And already we have many new ideas. So I can imagine that you have new topics for other podcasts with couples and other people. So So I look forward to hearing more from your account.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching and or for listening to today's podcast episode. If you like what I'm doing, don't forget to rate the podcast with 5 stars if you're listening to it. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. As always, I will link Enikö's details in the side note as well as in the description, so you can get in contact with her directly. If you would like to tell your love story, you will find a link as well. So just feel free to contact me, and maybe someday we're going to sit together and you will tell your story. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to announce that I'm planning a free workshop on the topic of identity crisis, especially for women in intercultural relationships. So if you're dating someone from a different country and you know how it feels like to feel lost and asking yourself who you are in this new constellation, please check out the first link. I will send you more information as soon as possible, but the workshop will take place end of May or beginning of June, and I can't wait to see you there. With this being said, have a lovely afternoon, morning or evening, wherever you are right now, and take care. Bye!